Colleagues and friends, welcome to our webinar commemorating 30 years of the Road Danger Reduction Forum, which was set up after a conference in Leeds in 1993 based on my book, Death on the Streets, Cars and the Mythology of Road Safety, which can be downloaded from our website. Please go to that to find out more about the Road Danger Reduction Forum. Okay, we have a very packed program this afternoon, and the emphasis is on speed, actually exactly the opposite of what we do in terms of road danger reduction. We want to try and be nice and fast and move swiftly, emphasis on speed and concision. So without further ado, our first presentation is from our esteemed President, Baroness Jones of Moulscombe, my friend Jenny Jones, who has done so much for road danger reduction. So on with the video from Jenny. Oh, let's hope we can have some sound.
Recovery time. And if I could, everyone, I'm so sorry I can't be with you. I'm taking an early Christmas break because I've been working hard in the House of Lords, and quite honestly, my patience with the government is absolutely exhausted. And so I need a bit of recovery time. And if I could be with you, I would be with you. And perhaps next year at the 31st, we can celebrate that together. I feel very, very privileged to have been asked to be president of the Road Danger Reduction Forum, because I think in essence what the forum does is changes the dialogue about road safety and how we have to treat people, whether they're in cars or on foot or on bikes. I've been interested in supporting the forum for probably more than 20 years, because when I was first on the London Assembly in about 2000, I started looking at the number of hit and runs and the number of road casualties, and it just didn't seem fair that there were so many people being injured, and somehow we took it for granted as if that
seem to have a bit of a glitch.
Bob, we'll move on to your slide.
Let's just
move on to your presentation.
Okay, yes, sorry about that, everybody. But we will try and get that video will be available at some time to those of you who have registered. Okay, so going on to my presentation. Yes, it was 30 years ago that the RDRF was set up in Leeds. By the way, please put any questions in the question and answer box, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. So what's happened? What are our basic principles and what has changed over the last 30 years? So road danger reduction, you can see what it means in the Road Danger Reduction Charter. Do go to our website. It's about reducing danger at source from the misuse of motor vehicles. Also, actually doesn't have to be always a case of where motorists are liable or at fault. It can be just from the actual everyday use of motor vehicles. That's where danger comes from. And we are part of the active travel and sustainable transport agenda. People often say they don't want to be political, but I'm afraid road safety, like everything else, is political. It comes under the governance of the Department of Transport, which has historically been about getting more and more cars and vans and lorries on the roads. Now the agenda, we hope, is changing to reduce motor traffic, certainly in urban areas, and we are very much part of that program. So our slogan is Safe Roads for All Road Users. We're supported by the benign road user groups, the green transport groups, and road danger reduction is now mentioned in the transport and safety strategies of some official bodies, such as, for example, Transport for London. And we're here to make sure that they follow through with their commitments. Our basic point is to try and get road safety thought about in the same way as one would think about health and safety in the industrial or workplace context, where you have a hierarchy which starts off with looking at the source of danger and only moves on to getting users of the highway network to try and cope with danger once that danger has been addressed as the priority at the top of that pyramid there. So our first point, which has singled us out as being different from the official road safety establishment, is that aggregate road traffic collision casualties is not a proper measure of safety on the road. And you're familiar with the analogy that you don't build a bridge based on how many people are swimming across a shark-infested river. The key point for us when we were starting out was that a lot of people don't get hurt precisely because of danger on the road, precisely because they, as cyclists and pedestrians, don't venture out or are not venturing out because they're not allowed to by their parents, precisely because of danger on the road. There is a hierarchy of danger. We all mess up in the highway environment, but when people using motor vehicles mess up, there is far more potential destruction potentially visited on other road users. Now, that has been recognized with the change in the highway code a couple of years ago during the response to COVID and as part of gear change and LTN 120, which you are possibly familiar with. That is something which we think was always there. We were keen to point that out. It's not a question of the false equivalence, which is promoted by the road safety industry, particularly road safety officers. Some people simply are more potentially dangerous to others, and that's what we're concerned with. So when we're measuring things, do not do things like this. This is from a draft set up by Transport for London in their Cycle Safety Action Plan in 2013, which after pressure from us and others was withdrawn. It looks at fatalities here for cyclists per million population, and it shows London as apparently doing a lot better than Oslo and Amsterdam. Well, of course, the reason why those numbers are a lot lower is because there are far more people cycling in Amsterdam and also Oslo to some extent. If you look at things in terms of the fatalities per cycle journey, it's quite different. That's the kind of thing which we have tried to promote, and with some success. So as part of trying to measure things properly, after a collaboration with the Parliamentary Advisory Council on Transport Safety, we managed to get this change in the official statistics produced by the Department for Transport. And this shows other road users killed by vehicle or road user in collision per billion passenger miles. It's looking at those who are involved as the third party hurting, or in this case, killing other people on the road. And as you can see, the main problem per vehicle comes from lorries, then motorcyclists, then bus or coach, then cars and vans, and right at the bottom, cyclists and then pedestrians. That's the way we want to look at things, pointing at the source of danger. And we have had some success with getting that kind of metric accepted at official levels. The second point is that everybody adapts to perceived danger, behavioral adaptation or risk compensation. I mentioned before that we have this phenomenon of people moving out of the highway environment as so-called vulnerable road users. I question the term vulnerable road user because there's nothing inherently vulnerable about walking or cycling. It's only vulnerability to road danger, which comes from motor vehicles. And you always have to remember this adaptation process. There are bad consequences, such as better protected drivers driving worse, the effect of idiot proofing, and I've mentioned parents restricting children's mobility because of road danger. Here's a mention of anti-lock brake systems and the key issue of seatbelts. After pressure from us and others, we can see that Mr. Gifford from PACTS admitted in 2009 that the effect of seatbelts showed a clear reduction in death and injury to car occupants, appreciably offset by extra deaths among pedestrians and cyclists. That's the kind of bad effect of risk compensation we referred to. A lot of this has been part of road safety practice of accommodating driver misbehavior. So one of my favorite quotes, where the response to cars being driven off the road into trees has been to remove trees and their stumps, as these can still be aggressive, and fences are a particularly aggressive form of man-made structure. So this shows how road safety has, in terms of both engineering practice and ideology, become part of the problem of road danger, in our view. And it's been known about for decades. But there can be good consequences to risk compensation. I think there's some evidence to back up the safety in numbers effect of greater numbers of cyclists leading to reduced casualty rates amongst them. Also, we've seen the benefits that occur when guardrailing, which was a traditional road safety measure, has been removed. So we say that much of conventional road safety is part of the problem of danger on the road. We think that it has a history of failing to address the problem of danger at source. It isn't getting that much safer in the way that it claims things have developed over the last century. For example, the last figures show that the majority of car drivers break the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. There has been this spectacular failure to address the problem of danger at source. A lot of that has been exacerbating danger, as with the more crash-worthy motor vehicle and the more crash-worthy highway environment. There is also persistent victim blaming of pedestrians and cyclists, pushing high vis, bicycle crash helmets, etc. And the way the metrics are used has led to a confusion, backing up this mythology of false equivalence, of claiming that this is an objective issue where we're all in it together, when in fact it is not as simple as that at all. So what we call for are supporting road danger reduction measures as part of a cultural change away from the car culture, what Ian Walker calls motor normativity, I've called car supremacism, or you can just call it general car culture. So that's a push to slower speeds, especially 20 miles an hour in areas where there are lots of pedestrians. Proper law enforcement and deterrent sentencing, including the use of citizen reporting from the likes of Cycling Mikey. Road space reallocation with LTNs, etc., as has been achieved with the gear change and LTN 120 documents during COVID. Technology like black boxes, automatic emergency braking systems on cars, and having the debate about driver liability to get genuine accountability from those who are potentially capable of hurting or killing other people. It's not a question of the numbers of people hurt or killed on the road. It's a question of the morality, as Jenny Jones was just saying, of how some people are allowed to endanger others. If you're just going to talk about the numbers, you have to look at all the other problems associated with the current road transport system. And we would therefore support the Beyond Zero agenda, which counts up deaths from greenhouse gas emissions, inactivity, also noxious emissions, etc. That's if you are looking at numbers alone. And we do want to bring in these factors because road safety is part of the general transport scene. We think there's a lot of a need to demythologize, to take part in the battle of ideas, which happens on social media and elsewhere, with some good police forces coming in and correcting misconceptions amongst all too many. You know about the road tax mythology, nonsense about number plates, etc. The idea that there's some form of war on cars. I think we need to call out the bigots because their bigotry does actually exacerbate already unacceptable levels of danger.
Bob, you need to tie up. You
okay,
2 minutes over time.
So that's the final slide. Think road danger reduction. Always remember that there's risk compensation. Remember that hierarchy of danger and the balance of power, and that road danger reduction is going to be critical for addressing global problems of climate change and global health and inequality. Thanks very much. And that's that. Okay, so are we ready to go? Yes, the next speaker is Amy Aeron-Thomas from the excellent organization Action Vision Zero. Amy's been involved in pushing the road danger reduction agenda for many, many years. So Amy, over to you. And don't forget, people, question and answers in the question and answer box.
Thanks, Bob. Next. I'll be talking today about how enforcement's changed in recent years to reduce harm posed to others. Next. And it's based on the work we're doing at Action Vision Zero, which is a small little CIC. It's mainly voluntary effort, but we do have a grant from FIT, Foundation for Integrated Transport, who I think fund all good road danger reduction projects. So I just wanted to give a shout out to them. Next. And I'm going to be referring to the PCC manifesto that the road danger reduction organizations developed for the 2021 PCC election. It was actually called Commit to Act on Road Danger. We had 5 key areas, and we'll be talking about the key calls in the first about make road danger reduction a priority. Next. Okay, so we wanted to see if the PCCs were actually including road safety, roads policing, road danger reduction in their police and crime plans. Now, remember, PCCs represent the community. They're required to produce a police and crime plan, and they have to consult with the communities. So over the years, we've seen road safety become more and more recognized. And in this current, it's the 3rd set of police and crime plans, road safety was included in all but 2 police and crime plans. It only missed out in South Wales and Hampshire and South Wales. It was even a priority for the community there. And in 8 PCCs, it was actually a standalone priority, so it even had greater significance. Next. Okay, and then we also want to see what were the police actually focusing on. They have limited resources. You all have heard about the Fatal 4. If you look at that, at speeding, drug driving, seatbelt, mobile phone. We've had problems with mobile phone legislation in recent years, so it's low. Drug driving, seatbelt offenses, those are aimed at vehicle occupants. And speed enforcement, of course, that's important for all road users. But with most speed enforcement occurring on higher speed roads, there's not as much benefit as there should be for people walking and cycling. So one of the key calls for our campaign was getting careless driving agreed as another additional priority offense for police. And several police services already do this. And now the NPCC are considering this. So we expect it to happen and consider that's real progress. You can also see that in recent years, since Operation SNAP was introduced, we've almost doubled the number of careless driving convictions. About 3/4 of those are out of court and 1/4 court convictions. And in certain areas, as shown below, they've done even more about increasing the number. Next. A third key call was around supporting tougher sentences. We called for PCCs to treat road crime as real crime. And the PCCs had already campaigned to get the traffic fine, the basic fixed penalty notice increased to £200 because, you know, it's still £100 for speeding offenses. And if you saw on the previous slide, that accounts for 2.3 million offenses. It's the vast majority of offenses sanctioned or speed limit offenses, and they still have a lower penalty. So the PCCs were campaigning for increased fine, with some of the money staying with PCCs. And the lead PCC was also calling out about the problems around exceptional hardship. That was Mark Jones in Lincolnshire. So what changed in recent years? Well, we got a new law around causing serious injury by careless driving. We also got the maximum custodial sentence increased for causing death by dangerous driving. We had the first consultation into sentencing guidelines in 15 years. And there they did increase the guidelines, the range. And also, I don't think many people know this, but now the mandatory disqualification for causing death by dangerous driving is 5 years. It went from 2 years to 5 years with the law change, which I think is good. In the terms of disqualification, there was a consultation on that a few years back, and the magistrates produced revised guidance around exceptional hardship. That came in 2021. So we haven't seen any stats about exceptional hardship use since then. But we've heard anecdotally from magistrates that it's very rarely used. We've asked the MOJ, we did an FOI request, but it got rejected. But we just hope that that is less of a problem nowadays because it has been addressed. And then the Sentencing Council, they announced in June they're going to do another wider consultation around disqualification, which will be fantastic. I'm not sure many people understand. At present, disqualification is considered like it's considered an ancillary penalty, so it's more like a rehabilitation order. And if we can get the Sentencing Council to see it as a core penalty, along with custodial sentences, fines, community service, then it could be used on a much greater basis, and they wouldn't worry so much about. They could use it on longer terms. So I think we've seen major reform, I'd say, around sentencing in recent years. And sorry, I forgot to mention victim surcharge. This has been increased several times in recent years. And with increased financial penalties, so we haven't increased the fines for motoring offenders, but the victim surcharge you have to pay at court. You know, we know that if every offending motorist paid the victim surcharge, it could raise 80 million pounds just in motoring offenses for victim services. Okay, next. And so the other key areas we called out about tackling speeding. We said it's the greatest threat. No other offense causes as much harm or dominates enforcement. Andy's talking about speeding later, so I'll leave it to that. Be transparent and accountable. If you want to look at real progress, look at Northamptonshire. They publish good data on the motoring offenses. It tells you the exact speed limit offenses are detected at. And even in terms of those that reported online, they'll tell you the reason for no further action. I think they're really good in terms of transparency. Work with your community. Cycling Mikey is going to be talking about bike cam reporting, but that also covered around like community speed watch volunteers. And we think they're the largest number of volunteers, people working with the police, and it's great showing community support for speed enforcement. And we are also calling for working groups to be set up. Right now, London's the only area that's got a Vision Zero or enforcement working group that involves campaigners. West Midlands and Essex, they've said some nice things about working closer. We hope to see progress there. Then improve the post-crash response. This is another key one for us. Next. Okay, so a key call for us was ensuring thorough collision investigation. So much depends on that. And in London, we've got the first ever in the country, the Police and Crime Committee conducting an inquiry into serious injury collision investigation. So this is a fantastic opportunity for us, and it's needed elsewhere as well. I forgot to mention, I want to give a shout out to Lambeth. They've got a new road danger reduction strategy, and in it includes a council-funded Met officer to ensure they have thorough investigation, which I think is just amazing. We've also had recent research published by DFT showing that contributory factors really ought to be collected at the end of the investigation, not at the start. And I guess we've got concerns around collision investigation. You got a lack of police resources, and we know there's been forensic collision investigation constraints. no longer, forensic collision investigators used to be called out to life-threatening collisions. They just don't have the capacity anymore. It's only the fatals. And you can see the number of convictions are down, over a third for causing death by careless driving. And those would be the harder ones to prove. I think harder than dangerous driving. Next. Okay, so our conclusion is we do think there has been progress over 30 years. You would hope so. And we think it's especially down to community support and technology with cameras. And we've really had good progress with sentencing reform. But it's around investigation and enforcement that remains challenging. And we think that's so important because we think justice depends on detection. So we are, we'll be producing another, hopefully agreed, joint manifesto for the PCC election next year. We'll be updating our calls. And and then contact me with any suggestions or further questions or further information. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Amy. We're going to go straight on to Detective Chief Superintendent Andy Cox, who is in the Metropolitan Police Service, of course. So go straight on to Andy. I'm just going to ask Andy one quick question to see if he can mention that in his talk. There was a question from Anna of 20s Plenty saying that...
can we do that later? Can we do
questions later? Okay,
in the
straight
Q&A.
on to Andy Cox.
Thanks, Bob, and congratulations on the 30 years for Road Danger Reduction Forum, which and for your work in making so much happen. So that's massively appreciated. And secondly, apologies for me. I'm on my mobile phone because my laptop has failed. So I've had some IT issues which aren't helping. But I'll do the best I can on this. And hope you can hear me okay. So we just move on to the next slide. Again, so I just wanted to give an outline at the start, and I've obviously have a relatively short period of time, and I'll try and make up some ground as well. Just around the culture really within policing and the perception. So this is around highlighting what people sometimes perceive as not real policing. And if you just flip to the next slide, and they kind of talk about things like this, horrific events that are other crimes, so CSE, domestic abuse, whatever it may be, other crime that's we know is really impactful. And they think that's real policing. And then if I can move on to the next slide, but we all know that's the reality of road crime there, and it's devastating, and many more people will die in a road crash than they will through murder or terrorism combined every year, and that's always been the case. I think it's about double currently, and those are the stats that we all know and understand. But it's important that we really continue to highlight that. So every 5.5 hours, somebody dies, and every 22 minutes, somebody's seriously injured, and that's a shocking state that we all have to change. Next slide, please. So really just some high-level stuff around culture. It isn't sufficiently embedded as a strategic policing priority within policing. We have daily management meetings where, if there was a serious other crime, lots of investment, lots of time, lots of focus, lots of resource. So road death, it sometimes doesn't get sufficient mention. So that's issues that we're trying to address internally to our challenge, but I think that goes across the sector and every agency, to be fair. It's a significant societal issue, but it reflects itself in policing as well. We have issues around data challenge. Those of you may notice the DFT published in November, and I retweeted it, a change to Stats 19 work. So I've been a long advocate of saying our data, because of Stats 19, is inaccurate. So we always use the first assessment point to determine what the contributory factors were. And obviously, if you first go to make an assessment, just as the matters occurred, the fatal crashes occurred, unsurprisingly, it won't be as informed after all the forensic work, after all the investigative work, every phone's been analysed, every witness has been spoken to, etc., as the last data point or last assessment. So we did a review of 2021, which showed significant changes, particularly in speed and intoxication, that went significantly up. So please do look out for that. It's a review of 2021, but I think we're going to do it now moving forward. Myself and DFT are working together to try and achieve that. But that's about correct data, which then allows us to target when, where, who, how, etc. And that's essential to everybody, isn't it? I still think in terms of our culture, road death is considered inevitable. We use that awful phrase accident, which would imply it's just one of those things, nobody could be blamed, etc. Instead of actually it's about a decision from the driver to be dangerous or selfish. And then we tend to enforce without an intelligence focus. So what I talk about is once you know your data, you can really hone in where, when, who to target. And that's work I'm obviously advocating on the back of the 2021 review as well. And then sometimes our assessment of 20 and 30 mile an hour, we tend to like to focus on fast roads and so on. But as anybody who follows me knows, it's about being in your 20 and 30 mile an hour zones to really hone in on the vulnerable road user to protect them. But actually, most of your serious and fatal crashes are going 20 and 30 mile an hour. That's hardly surprising because that's where a bulk of our people are, and particularly obviously the vulnerable. Next slide, please. So comms, that's still got a big issue in terms of trying to tackle our comms challenge and actually really make people understand what this is about. We've already talked about accidents, but I think again, in terms of the role of a road policing officer, how many times have people heard, you know, it's just a money generator, go and do a real job, etc. So that's some of the culture we have to overcome by educating the public, and that's why communication is absolutely vital, and we need to just constantly push that and explain that this is a life-saving role and it makes a real difference. We just flick to the next slide, please. And that's a little bit around what these strategic objectives are. So to try and redefine what we are, to make sure we get the investment, to make sure we get the resources, to make sure we get the profile, the influence within roads policing, both internal to policing, but obviously external as well. So it's save and protect life, tackle criminality, and I can reel off stats which show, for example, that uninsured drivers are around about 7 times more likely to be involved in a fatal crash, and more than 1 in 2 are likely to be active in other criminality within the last 2 years. So there's an obvious link to road danger and other forms of crime as well. By selling that message and by making sure objectives are there, we win the public confidence. We influence our key strategic partners to be more collaborative, and of course we influence the way people drive as well. Next slide, please. This talks a little bit about that. So by being really data led, identifying the where, when, why, targeting the right drivers, targeting the right causes. And in London, we introduced something called a tactical task and coordination group, which did just that. We've had it historically throughout policing in every other crime type. We've got it in road danger in London, and hopefully elsewhere, and it's been marketed and advocated everywhere. But to really understand our most dangerous roads, when are they the most dangerous, why are they the most dangerous? And I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm doing so to emphasize that's so important. Next slide, please. So just some examples. In London, we identified, we have over 9,000 roads. When you actually do the analysis, 136 had a serious crash prevalence and were most relevant for potential fatal crashes. And then when you did the analysis again, you could pick 3, 4, maybe 5 really high harm roads. So rather than targeting 9,000 and allowing people to go out the door from a policing perspective and choose where they go, we really honed their activities to 136. And then we've done something really significant around the A10 and the A12. And if those that remember those periods, they were really significant roads that were suffering from fatality. I think the A12 had about 5 or 6 in a relatively short period of time, 5 and 6 different fatal crashes, so not sort of multiple occupant deaths. The A10 had suffered in and around the Enfield area from an immense antisocial behaviour of cars, essentially car crews in the area, hundreds and hundreds would turn up on a Friday and Saturday and just blight that area. But also they were racing each other up and down the A10. They were doing all sorts of other sort of driving failures and illegal activity. And we really intensively deployed to those areas, right time, right place, right focus, real common strategy, enforced a huge amount of offences, seized loads of cars, issued Section 59 warnings, marketed what our outcomes were. So we used the Even Standard, we used some of the national media outlets as well. We deployed a drone on the A10, which got international sort of attention to it, and certainly from this scope in terms of our intelligence review of what the driving offenders were looking at across social media, we could see that they were noticing things like that, and we're thinking we can't drive dangerously there, so it's having a sort of preventative impapt. And touch wood, so far the levels of kill and serious injury are through the floor in those 2 areas compared to where they were. And in fact, I'm not sure we've had a fatality, but I need to check that because I haven't checked it for a little while. But certainly the levels were drastically down. It had a hell of an impact in terms of public confidence as well. So it shows it can be done when you have the intelligence. Next slide, please. So priority drivers, we developed a policy where you could identify the most dangerous drivers, and that was particularly significant drivers and multiple disqualifications, bad driving form, linked to other criminality, intelligence around them. And we really hit them hard. And it was 250 that were put on our ANPR systems under Operation Challenge. And all 250 had some form of positive intervention around them. And surprise, surprise, we found disqualified drivers, uninsured cars, weapons, drugs, counterfeit currency, stolen vehicles, and obviously had a mega impact on our highest harm drivers. But there's other things we really need to do. So I always talk about the compliant car principle. So we know there's 4 pillars: insurance, tax, registered, and MOT. Take any one of those 4 away, and you get more risk in terms of fatal crashes. Take away 2, it goes up again. Take away 3, it goes up again. Take away all of them, and it's a skyscraper of risk, essentially. So I'd like, and I know there's always work on going around this, but I want the agencies to talk to each other to give us a definitive, these are the people with all of those 4 pillars missing, and these are the cars. We'll then put them on the ANPR and have them as a high priority stop and ruthlessly go after them and relentlessly go after them. And I reckon that would have one hell of an impact. But it's, again, just trying to get that data. There's stuff we're looking to do, but it's hard work. But we do go after things, obviously, like the uninsured driver for the same reasons. Okay, next slide. Priority themes, no surprise, all the fatal 5, which obviously includes drink and drugs, mobile, seatbelt, and speed. Speed is by far the most important. So the data done with the review of the contributory factors demonstrates that from the 2021 and 20-30 mile an hour. So that is a culture shift, because people often wonder why we enforce in 20 mile an hour zones. Well, the data shows us that's where the fatal crashes occur. We know the speed in there. That's what we need to do. So that's a cultural shift, but it's a real focus for us in terms of speed enforcement. Next slide, please. Public reporting of road crime without trying to steal the fund of others that are coming. And the great work by Mark to help set Operation Snap Up and the concept of it. And Cycling Mikey for obviously all the work that you do. But I do think this is a game changer for us. So we now have the ability nationally to have the public report to us. Referral numbers are soaring, and we are so much better than we used to be around it. There's still an element of postcode lottery. So I do see the social media feedback where some forces do it better than others. You'll know, anybody that follows me knows how much emphasis I put on the reporting person should be updated with an outcome. Legally, we can do that despite what some suggest. We have done an academic review on this. It proves it saves life, which we'll never know how many lives are saved, but clearly lives will be saved because of the deterrence impact. We know it gives us enforcement benefits, crash investigation benefits. And we have put proposals in and got funding support to develop the concept of a one team, one place to report, one team to review, national standards. Really, I mean, this is a really significant event. If we can scope that out, it's a lot of work to do it, to pull all the 43 forces essentially into one team so that public who might travel through multiple policing areas on one journey and therefore see multiple people committing road crimes and have to report in multiple different locations can report to one location with the confidence that that team are trained, accredited, understand how to receive that, understand road traffic law, understand the strategic direction that we're trying to pursue, which is tackling road crime, keeping our roads safe, etc. Then I think the benefits will be vast, and then updating people will be easy, producing stats will be easy, showing the public the benefits will be easy. So that work is underway, and we are trying to get there. We have now some funding support to scope it, and that scoping will start, and it's got a real impetus behind it, and I'm overseeing that. And I really, really hope we can get something in. It won't be short term. There's a lot of work to do, but hopefully by sort of certainly by early 2025, I'm confident we'll have something in place. But that's something I'll update on later. Next slide, please. So I always talk about call to action because there's so much more we can do. The exceptional hardship, I heard you talk about that, Amy. I think it's around 1 in 5 from the data I have successfully claimed that. And I think that's absolutely outrageous. I know there are some signs of green shoots where people are taking a slightly different approach to it, but more does need to be done. It's an outrage, to be honest, that such a defence can be successfully claimed. Driving bans, the sentencing still nowhere near it should be. Driving's a privilege, not a right. So let's start having some longer term driving bans. There's lots that we can talk around. Manufacturers still see, is there really an appetite for them to prioritise safety over sort of power and things like that? And I think that goes back down to the consumer, who ultimately society still wants that power, wants that ego profile or whatever around a vehicle, certain vehicle type. So it's about a culture shift, which then influence manufacturers in the way they behave. Insurers incentivising safe driving, absolutely fundamental. Obviously, we can all talk about the media, the word of the accident and so on, and we've done that before. But the most significant thing, I think, would be speed limiters. And I still struggle to understand why we've got cars that can do north of 200 miles an hour on our roads. But even anywhere near significant sums above the maximum speed limit just seem nonsensical to me. So there's work that manufacturers and legislators can do to help that. But speed limiters for me would be the biggest single difference from a technology perspective that could help road danger. Next slide. Okay, thanks very much. I rushed through that because I knew I was slightly over, but obviously really happy to answer any questions, but I do may not be around later to do that, but by all means contact me should you wish to. Thanks, Bob. I can't hear you, Bob.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Andy. Very helpful. We'll be answering some questions. Keep them coming on. We'll do that in at the end of Sarah's presentation. But now we have a presentation from Mark Hodson, who with Steve Hudson set up the Close Passing Policing Initiative, which you may well be familiar with. So on to Mark's contribution.
More independent policing and transport think tank, whose main concern is reducing the amount of road harm we see on our roads, and in turn reducing the associated demand caused by that road harm. It's become apparent in the recent times that for the first time ever, central government policy actually works against what we are trying to achieve. The opposition to more LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, and the opposition to mandatory rollout of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits in urban areas, obviously at best will keep the amount of demand the same. This as KSIs will stay the same, or at worst see an increase. It's a strange situation, really, that we can't resolve without a change in government. Unfortunately, they seem to be dedicated to going down this path, and it's something that we as a group wholeheartedly oppose. Everybody knows that in the absence of change in the behaviours of the problem-causing group who endanger others on the road, the best way to negate the effects of their behaviours is to minimise the amount of kinetic energy involved. Low traffic neighbourhoods and 20-mile-an-hour limits are the ideal way to minimise the impact of those offending behaviours that endanger others. And to oppose them in any way seems just ridiculous to ourselves. But that's where we are. And it seems that in seeking the populist vote amongst the people who endanger others, quite simply the only way to put it, they're not going to change their mind. And so literally going forward, it's a case of that we're going to have to wait possibly for a general election, a change of government. But in the meantime, we'll push for better and more efficient enforcement. And regards that, first thing we need to talk about is how police officers are deployed. Obviously, the demand on the police is at a record high. And so you've got to be more efficient and more direct and targeted in changing wholesale behaviour. And anything that doesn't do that is just a criminal waste of resources. So going forward, we propose as a group that it would be unwise for police forces to dedicate resources, officer-wise, on the streets to mobile phone enforcement operations and operations looking at due care and attention offences, purely because it is widely accepted now that through third-party enforcement and the use of third-party reporting schemes, it's a much more effective way of prosecuting the offences, changing wholesale behaviour, and getting that reduction in demand that we so dearly need. The officers, when they are deployed, in our opinion, should be deployed to those offences that contribute greatly to, obviously, road danger on our road that can't be dealt with by third-party reporting. And so officer resources should be concentrated on, at the moment, seatbelt offences, which we've seen numbers fall greatly, offence numbers that are being prosecuted, I should say, not the actual offences. You seem to see more and more people not wearing seatbelts, but the amount of offences prosecuted and the threat of prosecution that would change those behaviours has fallen greatly in the last couple of decades. And so concentrated on things like seatbelts and drink and drug driving. Again, we see the same thing with drink and drug driving as seatbelts. The amount of enforcement has dropped greatly recently. You could have a real impact on demand through reducing the amount of KSIs caused by those. Obviously, those two offences are things that can't be dealt with by third-party reporting. Some people do think that seatbelts can be, but they can't, because at the moment, unless we have a change in legislation, there are defences that could just be rolled out to counteract a third-party reported not use of a seatbelt or unsecured child, in the fact that you could just say that the seatbelt wasn't working properly and there's nothing you can do to do that at the moment. So in the absence of changing legislation around seatbelts, it's a case of the police should just concentrate on that, drink driving, and of course the no insurance as well, which is something that does crop up occasionally through third-party reporting, but again can be easily negated by an offender just at court through existing defences that can be utilised. So going forward, that will be our main plan of action if we were in charge. Also, a more holistic approach to reducing demand, generally demand on society. So police forces have really got to get behind the idea, you know, that encapsulates low traffic neighbourhoods and those people who wish to use a form of transport that induces less demand on society, not only with the consequences of when they make a mistake, and people do make mistakes all the time, but also across the board, so less polluting, better for people generally in regards to their mental health. So it's got to be a real push for police forces to get behind those who wish to use active travel, and really, if they do that, then the benefits that brings to society and police forces with the reduction of demand would see them being able to then deploy resources elsewhere. And also a quick look at those institutions and sometimes even the forces that are failing at the moment in various areas around enforcement and behaviour change. There has to be a plan, there has to be a national plan. There needs to be some joined up thinking, and all police forces need to be asking themselves, why are they doing what they're doing? What's the end goal? And that end goal should just be to change wholesale behaviour. So they really need to push the awareness side, social media side, and get some quick gains through making drivers realise that if they are going to be part of the problem group, they can be easily be caught and dealt with. So there's a quick overview of what we think needs to happen regards enforcement and policies going forward. As you can see, it's a bit of a festive backdrop, and from everybody at the MPH Collective, we'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a great New Year, and to you all, safe journeys and continue the good work that you're all doing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. We hope to be hearing more about the MPH Collective. We're going straight on on the question of third-party reporting to the legend who is Cycling Mikey.
Hi everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so who am I? I'm Mike Van Oop. I'm just a nobody, an ordinary bod with an ordinary job and an ordinary life. And through circumstances, I've been forced into the limelight unwillingly because of some of the things I've recorded with my camera while I cycle. So yeah, I'm primarily a transport cyclist. I'm not a keen cyclist. I ride almost purely just to get places and to do errands. So some of the things that got me well known was catching Guy Ritchie on the phone who got disqualified, the angry doctors at Gandalf Corner, that kind of thing. Anyway, I don't really like the fame, but I feel I'm duty bound to leverage it as much as I can towards road safety. On my own, I can do very little, but thankfully there are literally tens of thousands of other people who are doing third-party reporting of road crime. And I think that's essential. And the big reason is that it's drivers' perceptions of the risk of being caught that stop offending, not the severity of penalties. I'm often seeing people asking for much harsher penalties for, say, mobile phone driving. I'm not sure that's the answer. We just need more enforcement. So AI mobile phone cameras on motorways, third-party reporting, that kind of thing. To be honest, I'm still quite bemused why people even watch my videos on YouTube. But anyway, I guess it's the way it is. What is quite good is I'm getting quite a lot of positive comments from people who've changed their driving and their way of being as a result of what they've seen in mine and other people's videos. What drives me? So partly it's being a vulnerable cyclist on the roads and not liking how some drivers treat us. I'd like to change that, and I think the way of changing that is by having cameras to show what happens in the moment, to teach people that what you do in your car on the public highway isn't private, and it can be shown to the world if you behave dangerously or otherwise inappropriately. Another one is my own kids and the young special needs lad Ibrahim, who I work with. Some of you may have seen his famous viral video with the King's Guard. Well, when we cross roads, it's quite scary and risky, so that drives me. And of course, many of you will know that 30 years ago, my dad was killed by a drink driver. And I'd really like for the chance to maybe prevent that call of the policeman at the door and their number ones to tell somebody else about a road death, because that's not a very nice thing to be involved in. Okay, so looking at the big picture, as I was saying, I think enforcement is important because of the risk of the perception of the chance of being caught. So it's always going to be needed with us as human beings. Like the other speakers have said, we all make mistakes on the road. Yeah, but I think probably some of the most important things are things that Andy mentioned: automatic emergency braking, GPS speed limiting on all new vehicles, and also more segregated cycle infrastructure. And the main reason for that is not just for the safety of cyclists, but for the safety of all other road users. I've read that segregated infrastructure saves the lives of not just cyclists, but pedestrians and drivers too. So it would seem really important that we get in as much of that as we can and become more Dutch. Moving on to what levers I can pull, and that's really how I look at what I'm doing, is finding things where I can be effective and using those. So first of all, it's the direct reporting of road traffic offences that I catch myself. And through that, I can affect probably a couple of hundred drivers a year myself. And that's just doing it in a little bit of part-time and not spending too much of my life on this. Then via social media, which is thousands of times more effective, I think, because I can affect the thought process of hopefully millions of other road users, simply by them seeing what happens out there and by seeing the consequences. I think we all need to see justice being served so that we understand that there's a chance of a consequence if you take a risk with your or someone else's life. Additionally, I think it's important for us to encourage other people to do third-party reporting. And then last of all is when I make appearances on mainstream media. I try and always get the press to include details on where to go to reports, on that there's thousands and thousands of people doing this reporting, that it's a normal thing to do, and that you too can be involved. So yeah, that's the kind of thing I think I can change. So how do I manage it in between having a life, a family, friends, and some hobbies, believe it or not? So most of all, it's just having worked out a workflow over the years. One of those was thanks to CycleGaz, is using a spreadsheet. I try and make my workflow efficient. I have a disciplined routine where I get home, I take the camera footage and ingest it into my workstation. I look at the highlight tags, because I tag the moments where things happen, which is where you see me pressing a button on the camera, so that I don't have to look at the whole footage from my commute. Yeah, and then put the batteries on charge. So for example, I've got a multi-set of GoPro chargers here, and I've created a little 3D printed pad, so it's all lined up and I'm ready to go. Yeah, then it's just a case of indexing the incidents and uploading them, which takes about 10 or 15 minutes to make a report. And then there's nothing to do really until it comes to about a year later, when the justice process is finished and I put it on YouTube. Some people really hate that I put this on YouTube, but I think it's important to show what happens out there. So as for third-party reporting that I know about, I think I'm up to about 1,650 drivers reported since the beginning of 2019. And I only know about 2,230 penalty points and about £134,000 in fines and costs and surcharges. I'm sure there's a lot more than that, but I'm not getting all the results through. From some other freedom of information requests I've seen, about 2/3 of third-party reporting comes from drivers with dash cams. So it's not just cyclists doing this. And as part of that, it turned out that the cyclists were about 16 times as effective as motorists in getting the police to take action on their reports, which is quite a stunning difference. And there are studies showing that cyclists tend to have better road safety knowledge than drivers, which is not too surprising given that we have much more skin in the game, perhaps.
Can we draw to a close, Mikey?
Yep. So basically, there's a couple of problems with the police reporting system. As good as London is, I think London's probably gold standard across the UK. I don't think there's enough resources because cases get dropped when they have peak loads during parts of the year. I think we need a unified national reporting process so that we have more consistency. There's a lack of updating in many police forces. Firstly, on whether there's an NFA, because you need to learn what can't be reported, on if they take action, and then eventually on outcomes. So we need to have those outcomes, because not having any of that feedback demotivates people from reporting. It stops us from learning what we should and should not bother to report. And most of all, the outcomes are the most effective way of getting observers to change behavior and to make the social media use of these video clips more powerful and for people to change their behaviors as a result. Yeah, that covers basically all I wanted to really talk about.
Thanks a lot, Mikey. Excellent work. Do stay with
Merry
us.
Christmas and a Happy New Year to you all.
Thanks. Okay, next speaker, last one in this section on road harm and enforcement is Sara Dowling from RoadPeace, the National Road Crash Victims Charity. Hello, Sarah.
Thank you, Bob. Hello. Hi. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. As Bob said, I'm Sara Dowling from RoadPeace, the National Charity for Road Crash Victims. And today I'm just going to talk a little bit about RoadPeace and the Road Danger Reduction Forum, what we do as a charity and what road danger reduction and road justice means to us. So next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, we go way back. RoadPeace and Road Danger Reduction Forum go way back. And it's great to be here today and for us still to be working together. And I'm going to start with sharing some words from RoadPeace's founder, President and Trustee, Brigitte Chowdhury. Brigitte set up RoadPeace in 1992 after her son Mansour was killed in October 1990 by a van driver who ploughed into him whilst driving through a junction with lights which had been on red for a long time. and she was shocked at the shabby treatment of his innocent death. He was 26 years old. So Brigitte says, my sincere congratulations to the Road Danger Reduction Forum and to Bob Davis personally on this special 30th anniversary. Our 30th was almost 2 years earlier. Right from its launch in February 1992, RoadPeace had a great media presence, and Bob phoned me one day after hearing us on the radio, telling me that he had long awaited for an organisation like ours. He invited me to a meeting connected with road danger reduction, attended by relevant colleagues and held still before the forum's official launch. When he explained road danger versus road safety, it was immediately very clear to me that road danger reduction was what RoadPeace had to pursue. And this was agreed and included as one of the 3 objects and powers in our constitution signed on 3rd of April 1993. Bob was also invited onto the RoadPeace National Committee, and he's introduced in our December 1993 newsletter as Technical Research and Policy Advisor and Chair of the RoadPeace's Subcommittee on Road Danger Reduction, and he remained on the committee for a substantial period. On our early information leaflets, we wrote, RoadPeace believes that road danger can only be dealt with by tackling its root causes, condemning irresponsible driving, educating road users about their responsibilities, and promoting a transport policy that gives equal consideration to all road users. Road danger reduction was embedded in all that RoadPeace did during my very active years from 1992 to 2008, the first 16 years of RoadPeace. I'm very glad that road danger reductions remain to this day the, quote, road safety, unquote, promoted by RoadPeace, and that both charities are still working together after 30 years towards near zero road deaths and injuries, for the success of which I'm sending my very best and sincere wishes. So I thought, Bob, you might like to hear that message. Next slide, please. So for those that don't know, and I'm not sure who on the call, how much you know about RoadPeace, we are the only member-based charity that provides support to families that have been bereaved in crashes and to people who suffered life-changing or serious injury. And we do this through a range of support services, including a national helpline, a befriender service, trauma support programs, and a network of local groups. A road death is always sudden, violent, and traumatic, and families often don't have the chance to say goodbye. And so opportunities to remember are important. We organise a number of remembrance activities, including at the RoadPeace Wood at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire, and on the World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims, which takes place on the 3rd Sunday every November to commemorate the 1.35 million people who are killed in crashes every year globally. And we know that support alone is not enough, and as a membership charity, we work with victims to support them and strengthen our collective voice in calling for change. Next slide, please. So there are so many wider benefits to road danger reduction, which I know others are going to talk about, but for RoadPeace, it's really about reducing road harm, specifically road death, injury and suffering. And at RoadPeace, it's our view that this will only be achieved by reducing the speed and dominance of motorised traffic, and that a road danger reduction approach is needed to do this. Every single day, on average, 5 people are killed in crashes in the UK, and there are 82 reported serious injury crashes. And behind these numbers are shattered lives and devastated families, friends and communities. And I think the hardest thing is that we know that road death and injury is preventable, and that in fact every road death and injury is a failure of the system. So right from the very beginning, RoadPeace has called for a more effective justice system that not only delivers justice to victims, but that also works to reduce road danger. And this includes both the potential to prevent crashes, but also how it responds to crashes. Next slide, please. Earlier this year, we launched a new campaign to fix our broken justice system, initially working with 4 families whose loved ones had been killed in crashes. This was launched on BBC Breakfast, and hopefully I'll share the link to this, the clip that launched it in the chat in a bit. Charlotte Skye Neglis was killed aged 6 by a driver who was speeding, drink driving and using a mobile phone. Lisa Carter, her husband Paul and daughter Jade were killed by a speeding drug driver. Lily Clack was killed by a speeding drink driver who was evading the police. And Frankie Jules Hoff and her unborn baby Neve were killed by a driver who was speeding and using a mobile phone to film himself on a motorway. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the campaign has several calls. There's a long-standing issue with lenient sentencing for road crime. So one of our calls is actually for longer sentencing for the most extreme cases of dangerous driving. Since July 23, lifetime jail sentences can be imposed for causing death by dangerous driving. And whilst we know this only affects a minority of cases, when you look at the extent of the criminality and the inevitability of harm with these chosen behaviours and the difference in treatment to other crimes, we are left with the question, what exactly is needed to get a maximum sentence? We're also calling for the greater use of longer driving bans. Courts have the powers to impose lifetime driving bans, but they rarely do. So why should someone who's killed on our roads through their reckless, dangerous and criminal actions be legally allowed to drive again? As Andy said, and many say driving's a privilege, not a right. And so we're calling for much greater use of longer and lifetime bans. We're also calling for immediate suspension of driving licenses following a fatal or serious crash. Agencies should have the power to suspend driving licenses immediately until the conclusion of legal proceedings. And we want to see the conditions for exceptional hardship tightened. The recent road justice report from the all-party parliamentary group for cycling and walking highlighted that approximately, I thought it was 1 in 4 drivers, maybe my math's not great, maybe it's 1 in 5, successfully argue against disqualification. And the exceptional hardship defence should surely only be granted in truly exceptional circumstances. And probably the most important is for a stricter, more robust system for drivers. So to treat road crime as real crime, ensure that dangerous drivers are dealt with appropriately at the outset and prevented from becoming repeat road traffic offenders. So in all of the cases I mentioned earlier, the driver had previous driving offences, and therefore there had been an opportunity for the justice system to take these dangerous drivers off the roads, but it failed. So I think essentially RoadPeace would like to see the justice system as the metaphorical spike in the steering wheel, as we're to use the classic RDR image, and to be robust, effective enough to prevent dangerous and harmful driving in the first place, and when the worst does happen, to deal with offenders appropriately so that it acts as a deterrent, lessons are learned and justice is served. Next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, in memory, I guess, of Charlotte, Lisa, Paul, Jade, Lily, Frankie, Neve, and all those others who've unnecessarily lost their lives in preventable crashes, I'm going to end here. Thank you very much for listening. And I whizzed through to try and make up some time. I don't know if I did. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Do stay with us. We're just going to have a quick question and answer session now. If we can all get together. The first question actually I can answer from Sharon was about, do you support graduated driver licensing for younger drivers, various measures to reduce danger from young drivers who are a particular high risk group? And the answer is yes, we do. Dr. Ian Greenwood's very good on this. We support his and other activities. It has been kicked down the road, as so much has by the Department for Transport, but we would support that. There's a lot of questions actually about police responses to people who've submitted video. We haven't got our 2 police and ex-police officers with us, so I don't know, can you tell us a bit more about how you'd like to see standardization and the kind of problems that are around, Mikey, and what can be done about those?
Yeah, it's very hard to get data from the Met. It's sometimes more and sometimes less successful. And I think it's really, really important that we have that data. I mean, the social media that we have of these clips of drivers breaking the law is far less powerful without those results. So I feel we need somebody like Andy Cox to take charge and force the people to give out these results. I don't know what the solution is really, but I have definitely seen reluctance from the police, both on a resourcing side, because obviously it takes time to give out the results, and also on probably a worry about the legal side and data protection in giving out results. But it needs to be improved dramatically, I believe.
Thanks, Mikey. There were other questions such as, what do we do about false number plates? Is there a connection between people who blow up ULEZ cameras and other criminality? We will try and pass it on to the relevant people. Anna actually asked about mandatory speed limiters, which are part of EU legislation, but which have been blocked in Britain by Jacob Rees-Mogg. They were, they're not necessarily the answer to speed because they can be overridden. Anybody have any ideas about how we could proceed in campaigning on the mandatory speed limiter front? Anybody? Yeah, Amy.
Yeah, I'll just say, so TfL is introducing it on their buses. They get, I can't remember if it's a third or 40% already have it. And they also retrofitted their whole fleet. So we're calling for them to extend that out to their contract vehicles and for other local authorities to adopt the same practice. But I think that's the way our local authorities or transport governments can lead by example.
Yeah, thanks, Amy. That's a good point. Question from Councillor Emma Bryn. Do you support regular retesting of all drivers, i.e. 5 to 10 years for all age groups, and how are you advocating for it? It's not just young drivers. There are issues about older drivers, which seem to be mainly about let's keep them on the road as long as possible, which is not our view. Do you have any views on that, Sarah or Amy?
It's not something we're particularly advocating or campaigning on at the moment. Amy, I don't know if you probably have a view.
The AA looked at this, maybe 20 years ago or so, and they didn't find any research or any evidence that this would help. So that's the only research I know. I think we know that it's not I'd say it's not a technical issue that why people fail the driving test. It's an attitude, so they can drive well when they want to. So I would worry that this wouldn't be the most effective way of identifying bad drivers.
Yeah, that would be my point, but it can be a way of addressing issues to do with the older drivers. But good point about how people can drive more carefully if they really want to. Now, because we're we've gone over time, we want to go on to the next session, which is on active travel and motor traffic reduction. And our first speaker is the person who created the concept of healthy streets, namely Lucy Saunders of Healthy Streets.
Hi, thank you, Bob, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to be talking about how Healthy Streets supports and enables active travel. Next slide. My background is that I'm a public health specialist, but I've worked in the transport sector for many years, and I work across the world. And we are actually very lucky in the UK to have something like this forum and this session today, because many other places I work have very little attention on this very important topic. Thank you. Next slide. The Healthy Streets approach in a nutshell is these 10 Healthy Streets indicators. And if you like this diagram, you can download it for free from the Healthy Streets website. Next slide. The top and the bottom of this circular diagram, we have our two maybe most important goals, which are to ensure that our street environments are places where everyone feels welcome and where people can choose to walk and cycle if they want to. Next slide. In the corners of our circle, we have the 4 biggest harms to human health that arise from traffic-dominated environments: air pollution, noise pollution, road danger, and severance. And if we look at the sides of the circle, we can see that it's not just about minimizing harm, but also recognizing that human beings have sensory needs. Beyond just being safe, we need to be in an environment that supports us throughout life, that provides things to see and do, shade and shelter, place to stop and rest, and a relaxing environment. So all of these indicators are not describing features of the street environment, they're describing how people feel on streets, and anyone can assess the Healthy Streets indicators. Next slide, please. And they're all interdependent, so anything we do on a street can have a positive multiplier or a negative multiplier effect. And the goal of Healthy Streets is not to pick an indicator out and work on it in isolation, but to recognise that we need to change the street in a holistic and joined up way to deliver better environments for people. Next slide. So this is an example of a no doubt hard fought for reallocation of road space to create a bidirectional cycle track. And the point I want to make is that this is the first step, but it is not delivering an environment that is truly embracing human need, because it does not provide the weather protection, the places to stop, the social safety, and many other factors that human beings need. So if we want to reduce car dependence, we need to think about all the things that people need from their street environment, not just physical space in which some find it possible to walk and cycle. Next slide. And this is an example of a street where some might argue that enough has been done. They've put in space for walking and space for cycling. They've put in some planting, but the way all this has been put together creates an environment which feels hostile and inaccessible for many people to walk and cycle, and it is still primarily facilitating the ease of movement and parking of vehicles, and so it's not in the whole and in the round creating a healthy environment for human beings, and it will not deliver that mode shift away from car to walking and cycling. Next slide, please. If you're particularly interested in street design, there is a tool that you can download for free from healthystreets.com, which you can use to assess the layout of a street for how well it is delivering the 10 Healthy Streets indicators. It gives a score out of 100, and there are different versions for different countries, but you're most likely going to be interested in the England version, which would also work fine in Wales and Scotland. Next slide, please. But delivering healthy streets is not just about design. It's got very much to do with management and use, which is why the first part of this session, focusing so much on management and use, is really music to my ears. So we need to think about these three elements together. Next slide. And to achieve the goals that we want in terms of a healthy street environment, we need to get lots of different parts of our system working together. And we need a framework that everyone can understand and buy into. So many of the people that you are going to be trying to influence may not be interested in road danger. They may not see it as a priority. So we need to find out what are they interested in and how can we use a framework like Healthy Streets to help us to bring them on board with delivering our long-term vision. Next slide. There's lots of things that need to be done within the system. These include reviewing and changing policies and planning of various agencies, changing the way that we communicate, making sure that we get much better at evaluating what we're doing and learning from it, building capacity. So this is an example here of politicians who are out doing healthy streets assessments. It's important that politicians, officers and advocates, as well as communities themselves, are given the skills and the tools to see the world differently and make change happen. Strategic coordination, what you're looking at here is the Healthy Streets Index. This one here is for London, which helps you to identify where you should be focusing your efforts and resources across the region. And the bottom right is an image showing a programme that I've been working on in London with the maintenance and asset operations team with Transport for London, who are looking at how they can make small changes called Healthy Streets micro improvements to street environments to make them healthier and safer. And I'm particularly interested in how we can make changes to the Transport for London road network that is having the speed limit reduced from 30 to 20, to see what we could do to make those streets look and feel more like 20-mile-per-hour streets through simple measures like changing the size of signage, the lines, the street lighting, etc. Next slide. Healthy Streets is a framework that helps to link many different priorities and agendas, and that makes it easier for us to get that cross-sector working. We can identify what our audience is interested in and then show them how delivering Healthy Streets will achieve their goals while also achieving ours. Next slide. There are resources and opportunities that you can access for free. I'll just take you through those now. So there's lots of Healthy Streets tools. Here's an example of some of them here. They're all free to download from healthystreets.com. Next slide. There's a video on YouTube on the website if you want an introduction, and there's also an image here showing you where you can download the design check if you're interested in the design tool. Next slide. There's a course that you can join that starts in March. It's online. It's 3 2-hour seminars that goes in detail through what Healthy Streets is, and you can book via Eventbrite if you want to know more about Healthy Streets. Next slide. And that's it from me. This is my email address. If you want to contact me about anything, I'm always happy to hear from you. Thanks very much. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That's lovely. Don't forget to go to the Healthy Streets website. Okay, next speaker is Stephen Edwards, is the CEO of Living Streets, which used to be the Pedestrians Association. On you go, Stephen.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Next slide, please. Thanks, Bob, and thanks for the invite to this event. Kind of great to be celebrating your 30th anniversary with you today. Many of you will know Living Streets. We're the UK charity for everyday walking, and we campaign locally and nationally for changes to our streets to enable and to encourage walking and deliver projects to do that with local, regional and national government. The case for walking and investment in walking is irrefutable in our view. Walking's free, requires no specialist equipment. Walking interventions offer fantastic value for money. One of the projects we deliver with DFT and ATE, for example, has a benefit cost ratio of 8.4, which is far in excess of the BCRs you see for traditional road building schemes. Walking's great for our health. It's the easiest and most accessible form of exercise in a world in which physical inactivity is responsible for 1 in 6 deaths. And of course, walking shorter journeys rather than driving those journeys plays a vital contribution in addressing air pollution, in addressing carbon emissions and improving road safety. And finally, a lot of the research we have done shows that walking actually makes really good economic sense for the high street as well. Contrary to the claims of some, walking schemes can generally increase retail sales by up to 30%. So it makes sense economically, and it makes sense in health and environmental terms as well. Next slide, please. One of the reasons it's great to be here today is that when I look back at the heritage of Living Streets as the Pedestrians Association, a lot of our initial focus was very much in line with the agenda of RDRF. Our founder, Tom Foley, saw this very much as about defending the public rights of pedestrians at a time when those rights were threatened by the growth of the motor car back in 1929. And as we head towards our 100th anniversary in 2029, we look back and there's lots of wins we can celebrate over the time, thanks to the work of Tom Foley and others within Living Streets and the Pedestrians Association. The first marked zebra crossings, the first highway code, the first urban speed limits. But there's still a lot more to do. And I think our mission remains just as relevant as ever, just as the RDRF's does as well. Next slide, please. So I want to talk briefly through a few different things today. I've already talked about how walking's good for our health, our environment and our economy, but I want to look at some government stats showing where walking levels are now, some of the barriers to walking, and what we need to do to improve walking and boost it further in the future. Next slide, please. So first of all, this is some data from the National Travel Survey, the most recent National Travel Survey, showing a bit of an uptick in walking trips in recent years following the low point of the pandemic. But concerningly, we're still walking less trips than we were 20 years ago. And there's a lot more that we need to do to increase walking. And the stats I haven't included here shows that we're driving 17% of trips under a mile, many of which could be walking journeys. So there continues to be an absolute need to shift from car journeys to walking. And much of our work at Living Streets is focused on how we achieve that modal shift, either through behaviour change or through campaigning to improve our streets. Next slide, please. If you look at the reasons why people say they don't walk. And this is from the government's National Travel Attitude Survey. There are a few recurrent themes that actually put people off walking. Now, I realise that no one can read this. That's my poor cut and pasting to blame. So let me just read through some of the headline points. 74% of people are put off walking by a lack of quality pavements. 45% say they're put off by unsafe roads. Another 44% by unsafe crossing points. 43% by a lack of direct walking routes. And 40% by a lack of provision for health needs. So, missing things like benches, toilets, ramps, etc. All of the kind of things that Lucy was just talking about. So people would walk more if our streets were safer and if we made better provision for walking. There are many things here that could easily be addressed, but they require investment and they require kind of political choices to be made as well. Next slide, please. There's similar data available on walking to school as well. And this actually demonstrates that a lot of people are put off walking and are driving their children to school simply because they are concerned about the safety of the school run or the school walk at the moment. And when people are asked what things they would do, what things would encourage them to walk more to school, they talk about many of the things that have run through the presentations today so far. Safer roads, slower speeds, more considerate driving, fewer cars, better crossing points in the right place, and better and well-maintained pavements as well. So we see the same kind of themes, the same kind of things putting people off walking. So the number of people out there on the streets don't reflect what they could reflect in the longer term. Next slide, please. Our concern at Living Streets as well is that these barriers have actually become worse in recent years as well as car use has increased. I just look at a few things that flow through the policy agenda at the moment. Pavement parking is very much in the news today because the Scotland government's ban comes into force right today. Our research shows that a quarter of over 65-year-olds are put off by leaving the house and are stuck in their house because of fear of dangerously obstructed pavements. Our cars are getting bigger and causing additional danger. And many of our communities are poorly planned, so they're not linked into public transport or walking networks, building in this car dependency that is so unhelpful for so many of us. And this is not helped by a lack of investment in walking, including really, really basic things like pavements. So lots of people are not walking who would be walking if investment was properly prioritised. But at the same time, amongst those who are walking, there is a disproportionate impact of road collisions on pedestrians and cyclists, as the data shows. And Bob kind of talked us through some of that data in his presentation right at the beginning. And the trend isn't getting any better. So just to finish off, next slide, please. Increasing walking can make a difference, but does require political choices and does require investment if we are to move forward. The highway code changes that came in 2 years ago were very, very welcome, but awareness of them remains low, and we need to do more to build the policy agenda around walking and to get that modal shift that I've been talking about. At Living Streets, we see this as being about 4 key priorities. It's about providing space in terms of dedicated walking routes. It's about improving safety for people walking and cycling, including by investing in more crossings in the right places. It's about speed, which again, we've talked about a lot already today, and about prioritizing a default speed limit of 20 miles per hour for most roads in built-up areas. And it's about banning pavement parking as well, with England following the lead that Scotland has already taken on that. So there's lots to do. we've made some progress over the last kind of 95 years, and Bob's made a lot of progress over the last 30 years as well. But we all need to keep on working and campaigning if we're going to achieve the change that we all want to see.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Just a quick question, since I understand you have to zoom off. Brenda asked, what is the Living Streets scheme that gives the 8-to-1 benefit to cost ratio?
That's our Walk to School outreach programme, which works with combined authorities and other local authorities to enable more children to walk to school.
Lovely. Thanks a lot, Stephen. And we look forward to working with you in the future. Next speaker is Tom Bogdanovicz from the London Cycling Campaign.
Hi, Bob, and happy birthday. I'm going to talk about some of the things that we have worked on together, as well as some of the things that London Cycling Campaign has worked on its own. So, in terms of cycling and safety, I mean, it's fairly obvious that the more cycling there is, the safer the roads become. I mean, cycles are simply less dangerous by virtue of their weight and the lack of major motorization. You can also fit more bicycles into the same space as a car, so it's less congested. Emissions are obviously next to nothing from a bicycle, even in terms of particulates, and motor cars not only emit CO2, but even the electric ones cause particulates from tire wear and brake wear. Noise pollution, bicycles make no noise unless you shout loudly. The cost of potholes, you know, something that the government has been contributing large sums of money to recently. Bicycles suffer from them, but they don't cause them. And inactivity, obviously that has a huge impact on the health of the nation. And the NHS costs of that are absolutely astronomical. So the more activity there is, the more we walk, the more we cycle, the more we take public transport even, the better. Next slide, please. And I argue that it's a no-brainer. I think we all know this, even the people who are, you know, attacking cycling and walking, they know this, that more cycling is generally good, which also means that, unfortunately, stories about cycling being bad are more newsworthy than cycling being good, because that is just so absolutely obvious. So, given that cycling is a common sense choice, as well as walking and public transport, why is it that there isn't more of it? And why are we having, you know, discussions like this ones? And why do we have problems? And the answer, next slide, please. Sorry, so this is the, sorry, I juggle my slides here. So this is the problem. £2 billion a year just on online advertising of these things. This is just an ordinary day in Sloane Street, and one of the typical cars you might see there. Newspaper advertising runs at of the order of magazine advertising runs at the order of £500 million a year. So an absolutely huge amount of money is persuading people that driving one of these things is good, raises your status, and it also effectively protects or stifles criticism should it ever appear in the papers, because that weight of money simply determines what the publication, whether it's online or in real life, decides to have. You know, you can't have unlimited critical articles because the advertisers will just not support the publication. And the other problem is exactly this, role models. And I think we can all think of any number of role models. I mean, think of anybody who is famous, and you know, this is the answer. They have car collections. I mean, it extends to, you know, TV presenters, musicians, but obviously footballers, women too. Kim Kardashian, Google her, Google Victoria Beckham, etc., etc. So that influences us. It influences our children. And how do we cope with this? Next slide, please. Campaigning. Obviously common sense, but to get that common sense across, you have to campaign. And we are proud of our members, but by comparison to the amount of investment in motoring, we're a tiny organization. And we do what we can, but you know, it takes an awful lot of work. We work out of one room. The Society of Motor Car Manufacturers has a whole, or half a block in Westminster, let alone sort of one room. So I'm going to look at just two things that we've done. One, basically a London Cycling Campaign initiative, which is about infrastructure. And the other one was something that we all collaborated on, which was about reducing road danger from lorries in particular. Next slide, please. So this was our campaign to improve the quality of infrastructure. And next slide, please. And there you can see that all of the politicians ultimately supported it. There's Daniel Moylan of Kensington and Chelsea, Lord Moylan now, in the centre representing Boris Johnson. So even he signed up to our campaign to get some quality, 3 great schemes in London. And next slide, please. And we provided some illustrations to guide the politicians. Next slide, please. So the first one, as you saw, was Westminster and the roads around there. And this is the Olympic Park. We chose somewhere else that was iconic. So again, you can see what we had hoped would change to what was a 6-lane highway. Next slide, please. And lo and behold, common sense came to the fore, and Boris Johnson there is opening the Embankment and Blackfriars cycle route. Next slide, please. And there you go. This is Westminster after transformation, not unlike the drawing that we created and what we campaigned for. Next slide, please. And this is the road outside the Olympic Park, Stratford High Street. So again, radical changes, and they've been filled up with cyclists. And those of you who use them will know that the embankment one is just rammed at busy times. So we need more. And next slide, please. And we also campaigned about Holborn, not once, but many times. And it took, sadly, 8 tragic deaths before something was actually done. There were all sorts of obstructions and problems. And next slide, please. And this is an artist's impression of part of that junction, but the works are going ahead now, and it's still not perfect, but at least it's being improved on. Next slide, please. And the other aspect is the work that we've all collectively worked on. Bob, Roger, Brenda, everybody has been involved in the road danger reduction in terms of lorries. Next slide, please. So we knew that HGVs were a huge part of the fatalities in London. 50% of cycling fatalities, 20% of pedestrian fatalities, and part of the problem was blind spots. So campaigning for lorries like this one, which Sadiq Khan is sitting inside, is what we try to achieve. Next slide, please. That explains the difference between a traditional lorry, where visibility is really poor, and a direct vision lorry like the ones above. Next slide, please. And lo and behold, they've arrived on our roads. It has been a struggle, but this is not a refuse cart, and you'll be pleased that in London, most refuse carts are, almost all refuse carts are like this now. That's not the case in the rest of Europe. They've still got to change, but we're also getting other lorries. And yes, next slide, please. And one other aspect of this campaign involved sort of training the drivers, and these are drivers being trained, and it is part of a standard called FORS, Fleet Operators Recognition Scheme, and everyone who signs up to this scheme is expected to train their drivers. And another scheme, also parallel to that one, is clocks. Can you go back one? Okay, sorry, which adds construction site safety to the safety of the vehicle and the safety of the training for the driver. And this enables sites to have marshals around them. And all of this can be done, as somebody else was saying earlier, through procurement, not just through goodwill, but councils, transport authorities can all require that clocks, fours, direct vision are part of what their contractors will deliver. And final slide. And big thank you to everybody for contributing to the work that we've done, and we look forward to further developments. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom. That does kind of raise in me the idea about whether we should be dealing in campaigning in confronting people like the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders more. Probably, I don't know. Anyway, one to think about. Okay, last of our speakers is Roger Geffen. Roger is, apart from getting the MBE for his work in promoting cycling with Cycling UK, then CTC, is now working also with the Low Traffic Alliance. He's a long-term anti-road building campaigner. Another anniversary recently was the 30th anniversary of the Nome 11 motorway campaign. Okay, Roger, over to you.
Well, thank you, Bob. And yes, so yeah, Low Traffic Future Alliance, just to sort of add one word to our name. But yes, as Bob said, I have two part-time roles. Some of you will be aware of my role involvement in various aspects of road danger, around road traffic law and enforcement, and the highway code in my Cycling UK job. That's now a part-time job. It'll be a role I'll be exiting in about 4 months' time. I've taken on a new part-time role with the Low Traffic Future Alliance. Having said that, I do just want to kind of, let's talk through the Low Traffic Future Alliance, because we're probably the newest organisation here, so hence I need mostly to talk about the future. Our vision is a world with clean air, safe streets. So you can see that straight away we're linking many of the issues that Lucy showed on her side, showing that road danger reduction is linked to so many other positive health, environmental, quality of life, social inclusion benefits, you name it. There are many reasons to want a less car-dependent future. Our mission is to build a movement pressing for action locally and nationally. We were set up by the Transport Action Network, which is mostly set up to support the community groups in opposing road schemes, and then they secured some funding to do, as it were, the positive side of the coin. So moving on, I just want to talk through a bit about what we're going to be doing. Sorry, there's our members. So our members are bringing together environmental groups, sustainable transport groups, road safety, health groups. It really does express that point about the joining up of road safety with a whole wider range of other coalitions. So you can see health and air quality groups such as Global Action Plan, UK Health Climate Alliance, so yeah, quite a range of groups. Moving on. So the national, I just want to talk through what we're doing nationally and then what we're doing locally to move this agenda forward. The national opportunity that we thought was there, and I hope will come back because it's disappeared for the time being, is the possibility we'll get a transport bill. If not from the current government, well, we're not going to get it from the current government, maybe from the next government, a transport bill that gives us an opportunity to revive some existing legislation dating from 1998. At that time, Friends of the Earth did some great campaigning around road traffic reduction, got some legislation passed that requires the Secretary of State, it's still there, requires the Secretary of State either to set targets for road traffic, to reduce road traffic, or to write a report explaining why not. And in doing either of those two things, he or she must take account of all the things you'd want the Secretary of State to take account of. So climate, clean air, congestion, landscape, and of course, road safety and social inclusion. Everything you'd want the Secretary of State to be taking account of, but he only has to do one of those things, write a report or explain why not, at such times as he deems appropriate. If only we could get those few words amended to every 2 years, then we'd have some really useful legislation if the Secretary of State had to think about traffic reduction targets, taking account of advice on climate change, air pollution, and all the rest of it. That could be very, very powerful. Moving on. So what's the local focus? Well, this too dates from the late 1990s, from the time when John Prescott was the Transport Secretary, and he really was genuinely trying to do this thing of road traffic reduction. He worked out that if he was going to get the local authorities to play their part in reducing road traffic, he needed to set up a new funding system called local transport plans. So until local transport plans came along, local authorities got 1 year's worth of funding at a time, and they were saying, please give us long-term funding certainty. So the deal he struck with them was, he said, dear local authorities, you write a local transport plan setting out a long-term vision and a 5-year plan, and we, Department of Transport, will fund it depending on how good we think it is. That worked for 2 5-year periods until the coalition government came in and said, we don't want local authorities wasting time writing plans and strategies. Instead, they made local authorities jump through hoops to get their funding from the Levelling Up Fund, Future High Streets Fund, lots of little funding pots that came and went. Of course, filling in competitive bids was a far bigger waste of time for the local authorities than writing a strategy. So 20 years later, the local authorities were back to saying, please give us funding certainty. And to their credit, the local government said, yes, okay, we'll revise local transport plans. Better still, moving on, they said the local transport plans would be required to include walking and cycling infrastructure plans, bus service improvement plans, electric vehicle charging strategies. We're not quite so interested in that bit. We're interested in fewer cars, not just newer cars. But this really interesting bit is called quantified carbon reductions. And I keep insisting on adding the word targets, even though the government doesn't like saying that. So we've been briefing people from all of our various member organisations, whether it be FRO groups, Campaign for Better Transport groups, you name it, on this opportunity of local transport plans. Except that the government still hasn't actually released the statutory guidance that local authorities are supposed to follow when writing their local transport plans. In the meantime, however, we wrote this document. Sorry, I don't know whether you can see it with blurred camera. We wrote some guidance for campaigners and councillors on what we think should be in a good local transport plan. It's downloadable from our website, and we've been briefing people on what a good local transport plan should contain and how to influence it. But has the opportunity faded after all this guidance hasn't appeared, and instead the government is talking about a plan for drivers instead? So what about that then? Moving on. So we're instead, rather than seizing an opportunity, we're briefing people to hang on to those good, to the opportunities, and in the meantime, briefing all of the political parties to make sure that as they come up for a general election, that they hold on to all of the good things. And hopefully this agenda can move forward in about a year's time. In the meantime, it's worth reassuring your local councillors that the plan for drivers is number 10's transport policy. All that good stuff about local transport plans is still the Department for Transport policies. There are 2 very different transport policies in action at the moment, coming from different bits of government. So we need to hang on to the positives. Final slide. Looking forward to the future, I think that, at a time when there's a bit of political lack of courage from all of the political parties about, are we being anti-driver? We just need to sort of communicate the most intuitive of our messages. And I would suggest that some of this stuff about what could the school run look like as distinct from the school run that everybody surely hates. If we can kind of get that message and get politicians to revive their confidence in a less traffic future, then we will be moving forward rather than backwards. So do take that guide to your local councillors. You will be doing your bit, not just for reducing danger, but for tackling the congestion, pollution, climate crises too. And there, I think I will leave it with that call to action around the wider agendas.
Thanks very much, Roger. Yeah, don't forget to go to their website as well. So we've now got questions and answers. They seem to have dried up a bit. Yeah, I think we need to have links that are being asked for by transport initiatives to go in the chat. Will Forrow asks, shouldn't we be campaigning for on-demand shared taxi buses using phone technology, which is the biggest hope to persuade people out of cars? There's a national parking platform. Shouldn't there be a national taxi bus platform? I don't know any answers on that. Anybody? Roger, Lucy, Tom? Any answers? My particular answer would be that I don't think that's actually going to be the way forward. I think the best hope is actually more on, yes, walking and cycling. There are possible ways in which you can share cars. That's not the same as a taxi bus, though, is it? Or is it? Is the chat fully open? Oh, well, Roger's got resources for influencing your local transport plan are in the webinar chat. Any other comments?
Bob, I'm not sure if that's gone to all participants or whether it's just gone to panelists.
I think it could have just gone to panelists.
I'm not quite sure how to post to all participants.
Yeah, I think
someone, if Brenda or someone could
we will
kind of transfer that so that everyone can see it. Thanks. Thanks, Brenda.
We will try and get things through to people, either through the recording, which includes material on the webinar chat, or else, if necessary, on the Road Danger Reduction Forum webpage. Any other questions? Transport Initiative says, have you been in discussions with ATE, Active Travel England, which is the formal government body? I have been in touch personally, yes, with Brian Deegan. RDRF hopes to be involved in road danger reduction training in local authorities in the future, and other bodies who want to know more about road danger reduction, the road danger reduction agenda. Where are we with questions? Which?
Oh, if I'm still on.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the message about shared transport is obviously something that we had in our campaign for climate safe streets, and it you know, regardless of whether it's taxi buses, shared cars, shared bicycles, shared scooters, shared transport is obviously a way forward because it reduces the congestion and it addresses the question, the problem of there being parked cars everywhere. We utilize, you know, a large chunk of our road space for parking motor vehicles. So if we can move to shared vehicles for a range of purposes and different kinds of vehicles as well, that's obviously the way forward. So we certainly wanted to see that. In fact, we also specified that there should be such transport within, give or take, 300 meters. It's obviously easier to be done in towns, in urban conditions. So in London, we were obviously a London organisation campaigning for improvements in London, and 300 meters is typically what you get for well, shared cars and indeed shared bicycles. The Santander scheme is roughly at that sort of distance. And I think some of the other shared dockless bikes are aiming for similar or shorter distances, even because that's what people need to walk to.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Just one quick comment on that. Apart from those things in highway infrastructure, I'm big on creating secure and convenient parking for people who want to use bicycles, subsidy for people on low incomes with roadworthy bikes and accessories, and other so-called direct support for cycling measures, confidence training, and so on. Quickly on to Roger, you had your hand up.
Sorry, it was just, are we going to add something on the question about shared transport? I'm sorry, I missed the actual question, but yes, Como UK, Collaborative Mobility UK, the charity promotes all forms of shared transport. They're one of the members of the Low Traffic Future Alliance. We've got some stuff about all forms of shared transport in our local transport plan guide. I do want to just raise awareness of one particular case study of ride sharing rather than car sharing, which is the Arup campus in the West Midlands. They expanded their campus, i.e. they built more office space, but didn't build more car parking space. Next thing they knew, they got lots and lots of double parking in their car parks. The fire service came in and said, you've got so much double parking that if we had to put out a fire in your building, we wouldn't be able to get our engines in. If you don't sort the problem out, we will shut you down. They did. They brought in a little charity called Lift Share, who organised a lift sharing scheme so that, you know, if you got a neighbour who was travelling to the same destination, the same out of town work business park, you could swap QR codes as evidence that you'd given somebody a ride, or you'd received a ride. Parking problem solved, climate emissions solved. Another co-benefit was it suddenly became a much more friendly workplace as people started getting to know colleagues who weren't their immediate colleagues, helping each other out with the lifts on the school run. So it's a lovely study, not just of the role of ride sharing as a good way of doing things, but also those co-benefits that go way beyond road danger and environmental and all the rest of it. There's a little quality of life benefit from ride sharing.
Right, lovely. Thanks very much, Roger. We've had a request from Sara Dowling to put the Jenny Jones video up. I don't know if it's available now, and if it can be shown, if we want to just show in the last few minutes of this webinar. I don't know if Brenda's got any views on this. Let's see if we can have another go at it.
Everyone, I'm so sorry I can't be with you. I'm taking an early Christmas break because I've been working hard in the House of Lords. Everyone, I'm so sorry I can't be with you. I'm taking an early Christmas break because I've been working hard in the House of Lords, and quite honestly, my patience with the government is absolutely exhausted. And so I need a bit of recovery time. And if I could be with you, I would be with you. And perhaps next year at the 31st, we can celebrate that together. I feel very, very privileged to have been asked to be president of the Road Danger Reduction Forum, because I think in essence, what the forum does is changes the dialogue about road safety and how we have to treat people, whether they're in cars or on foot or on bikes. I've been interested in supporting the forum for probably more than 20 years, because when I was first on the London Assembly in about 2000, I started looking at the number of hit and runs and the number of road casualties, and it just didn't seem fair that there were so many people being injured, and somehow we took it for granted as if that's just what happens on our roads, and that's just not right. So I did a report in 2007 called London's Lawless Roads, and that was about the hit and run incidents in London. And I did the report for Ken Livingstone, and he was very good about it. But we have not moved on enough, I would say, and that's part of what the forum does. The forum is pushing for an improvement in that whole scenario. Traditional road safety, I'm afraid, just doesn't really do the job. It doesn't consider the reality of people who actually don't walk or cycle simply because they're frightened to use the roads, and that simply isn't right. So one of the things that the Road Danger Reduction Forum has done, a real achievement, is to get official recognition of a metric which brings attention to those road users most likely to be involved in hurting or killing others. I could see then and still see that essentially the moral and political issue of being able to endanger others with your driving isn't being properly recognised until we actually think about the road danger reduction approach. That is so much clearer and makes it much simpler to deal with the problem. And of course, the leniency in sentencing is a big part of this. I'm still caught by complete surprise when I see some of the sentences handed out to someone who has been drunk driving or drug driving and has killed somebody, and they've taken not only the life of that person, but they probably destroyed the lives of their family and friends as well. So we have to see transport as part of road safety and proper road design and road laws, of course. We've got to cut our dependence on cars, and we have to stop government policies which actually help to increase car use. For example, more road building and all sorts of other mechanisms. So road danger reduction pushes on all these fronts. And I must say that Dr. Bogdanovicz has been absolutely phenomenal. He's an example to us all. And I am very, very proud that I know him and that I've been able to work with him. So I would like to say that at some point, Road Danger Reduction Forum will be obsolete because we will have a completely new way of looking at transport and traffic. Until then, I'll carry on working, and I'm sure you will as well. And so I do hope you enjoy this celebration of 30 years.
I really need to say thank you so much to Jenny for that, not just the comments to me. That I think we've had our 2 hours. I don't think there are any urgent questions right now. I want to thank Creative Concern for helping with us. Brenda Pesch in particular was the main organizer, and all our speakers, as well as the Road Danger Reduction Forum Committee. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much to all of you who've participated. The recording can be seen by those of you who have registered but haven't been able to attend. And I'd like to say thank you, and do help us in the next years as we advance the road danger reduction program.